Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Profit Minds podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Stephen Kirch, creator of the Profit Minds Growth System, a unique blend of profit growth, productivity acceleration, and building robust business process for scale. In every episode, I interview entrepreneurs and small business owners from around the world with a unique story to tell. You can find the show on YouTube, LinkedIn, Apple and Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, and more. Hi, everyone. Today, my guest is Larry Kaul, a serial entrepreneur who has built successful 6- and 7-figure businesses. His current focus is on what he calls the red pill pathway, which is his attempt at finding freedom, satisfaction, and happiness without compromise as an entrepreneur. Today, we're going to explore the importance of vision and the inner development needed to realize your dream. Welcome, Larry.
Hey, Stephen. Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you on the show. The question that I always ask to start out, because I find the answer so that the stories of people as how they got to where they are. I'd love to hear your story. How did you get to be the founder of the red pill pathway?
It was accidental. I was one of these kids that was always looking out the window, kind of daydreaming, not paying attention, and finding it now, if I look back, understanding this better, difficult to fit into the structure, the let's call it the matrix of the society. And the challenge that I had as I got older was that never went away. It continued. But I didn't really understand what was going on with myself. So I attempted to fit in, and I attempted to find some kind of a box to throw myself in, unsuccessfully. And what happened was I got an opportunity to do something more entrepreneurial in a family business when I was in my early 20s. And I was able to take that business and 7X it fairly quickly. After a few years of doing it, I never felt a sense of wanting to do that or even recognizing that I had a valuable skill that fit me. And I continued with this idea of somehow I've got to find some box to put myself in called lawyer, economist, business person, or professional, what have you, as opposed to being the type of person that just creates my own life and my own reality, to my own, to just giving myself what I really want. And that's kind of what ended up happening over the next few years. But that's kind of what kicked that off and led to what ended up happening years later.
Yeah, so you've built some businesses as an entrepreneur. So you did this, with a family business, and then did you sell that and then start over again? How did that?
So what happened is I built up that business, and in my 20s, it was a sales distribution company, and it was just basically me, my mom, and my grandmother, and my dad. And
That's family.
and I went into the business over the summer just because I couldn't figure out how to get a job when I got out of college, and what I wanted to do. And I remember feeling this sense of frustration because we had a competitor whose service entrance was right at our front door that was doing significantly better than we did. So they were the top company in the industry that we were in. And it bothered me that they threw their garbage out and it sort of ended up in front of our front door. And it never bothered my dad or my mom or anybody else, but it bugged me. And I felt like I want to beat them at this game. And I ended up doing that and figured out how to grow that business, how to take it to the next level. And we actually ended up switching offices over a 5-year period where they ended up going into our small office and we ended up going into their large office, which was the dominant office in that industry. And after that happened, I lost interest and I left the business. And I started working in the marketing industry, doing key account sales for marketing communications companies, which I did for a number of years. And then when my mom and dad were still using the structure that I'd used to create and scale that business, wanted out of that business, I thought, well, I want to work for myself again. So I went back and took over that business, and then left the industry that I'd been in, and the industry collapsed. It's a distribution company selling to retail stores. So the industry collapsed, and I got out of it at a time where I was still able to exit with enough cash to kind of have another act after that. So that sort of led me towards
Mm.
getting, I'd say, hardcore business ownership skills, which is the best way to get hardcore business ownership skills is to be getting your butt kicked by the economy or the industry or the company that you're in. So I had the opportunity to do that for about 6-7 years.
Yeah. So what was the biggest takeaway from that butt kicking that happened?
I think the biggest takeaway for me was that it's possible to do things that you don't think you're capable of, or that I didn't think I was capable of, that I didn't want to do. And I realized that I surprisingly enjoyed the pain of dealing with what felt like overwhelming problems and figuring out a way to be overwhelmed and not care. I think is a really important business and entrepreneur skill.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Um, because so many of us that are, entrepreneurs, small business owners, we we don't like the feeling of being overwhelmed. It happens all the time. Uh, but we really don't like it. So how do you deal with that? How do you help people, or how do you talk to people who are feeling overwhelmed?
Well, it depends where they're at in their own development. So let's say I look at the guy that was running that family business after I took it over. I would look at it as teaching confidence and skills. So I would help him better understand his capabilities and how to develop himself to the point where he can execute on what he does really well and learn how to build a team and delegate responsibility towards others. So I would call that level one. So that's that level I would call of the phase of entrepreneurship of winning. So the idea is, how do I win a victory over myself? How do I win a victory over the environment I'm in? How do I master struggle, effort, and challenge? So if I was talking to him, that's where I would focus. And I have some methods in terms of how I would help, do that.
So where does the vision play a role here of trying to understand where you want to be, where you want to
Yeah.
go?
Yeah. It's phase two. So it's phase two and phase three, but particularly it starts in what I would call phase two. So phase two of being an entrepreneur, this is at least my model that I created with Red Pill Pathway, I would call thriving. So thriving's a big vision phase, a beginning of a vision phase. So thriving is when there's just this realization of struggle, effort, and being up for the challenge and figuring out the skills, and all of that doesn't matter anymore. You're kind of tapped out on that life. This idea of making things happen, pushing for success, forcing results and outcomes, and getting better at anything. There's just this moment for me where I realized that none of that mattered anymore. And in the giving up of that and the surrendering of that, what I found replaced it was this phase of thriving. So thriving is when opportunities are coming to you. There's a sense of enjoyment in capturing those opportunities and allowing them to fulfill themselves. And then moving into a sense of purpose and meaning and satisfaction with what you're doing. And that phase is all about vision to me. It's all about understanding vision is a creative process. So we're business people in the winning phase where we're trying to figure out how to make stuff work, how to make it happen, how to succeed. But in the thriving phase, we're more like creatives. So we're more like artists understand this, musicians understand this. But if you look at the great business people throughout history or the most successful business people out history, that's how they did it too. So if you look at a Warren Buffett or a Walt Disney or Oprah or somebody like this, they weren't trying to figure out how it works. They were trying to create. They weren't trying. They were create. Steve Jobs. They were creating something which came from a vision, which comes from inside. So it's the tapping in that inside vision and knowing how to harness that and create that in something tangible in the form of a business that works for you, that is really that second phase of thriving.
That's interesting. Because most people, including myself, think of that vision phase as something that you do almost before you get started. I have this vision of this business that I want to create, and yeah, the first part is struggle, and then the next part, yeah, I think you're right. It's thriving, right? So, but doesn't the vision play a role in how and when you struggle and where you're headed and all that kind of stuff as well? As I'm a little bit
Yeah.
so talk about that, the vision sort of at the beginning, and then how does that morph as you become more successful?
So it's in the definition. So
Okay.
vision, so the difference between vision for me in this thriving phase and then goals and objectives and KPIs in the winning phase is it's apples and oranges, completely
Okay.
different. So in the winning phase, it's about whiteboarding. Like, what do I want? What does the market need? What do I want to create for the market? How do I do it? What are the skills I need to do that? That's what most people in business are doing.
Right.
I'm talking about something different. So what I'm saying is do that and you may be successful. And there may come a moment where after you're successful, you don't want that success anymore. It's not really what you wanted. So this is the existential moment of wow, I screwed up my life. I succeeded, but I never got what I really wanted. I didn't do what I came here to do, in other words. Now, the most successful people in the world either skip that stage altogether or they were in it for a long time. Simon Sinek talks about this, where he was in it for a long time. And then it just was like, well, I don't want to do this anymore. This isn't working for me. Now, vision emerges from the place of discovery of who you really are and what you're here to do. So Steve Jobs had a vision for something. Walt Disney saw a theme park in a swampland without any evidence that that could be a theme park. And everyone else thought he was nuts. But he knew it was true because when you operate from inner vision, you always know it's right. There's a connection to that inner truth as it emerges. So that's the big difference between the two.
Okay. So I think what you're suggesting here is that people don't really have a vision of what they want to do or be until they have achieved some level of success, because it's sort of like that the hierarchy of need, right? That you got to get your basic needs, and once you get to that point, then you can start thinking at the next level. Is that
I think it depends on the person. I think that's often true. And I think that's created by our society because our
sure?
society has taught people that the external condition is all that matters. And that is the values in our society in the modern world. In the modern world, the belief is basically you are what you have. So if you have a life that is giving you freedom and satisfaction and happiness and all these things to all appearances, to all outward appearances. And people can look at that, it can be measured, and you can see it on Facebook or Instagram or YouTube or something. And people are like, well, that person's great. They're doing great. And you can kind of delude yourself into you're doing great as well. Now, for some people, that's all they'll ever want. And they're fine. Now, there's other people where I think they figure this stuff out coming out of the gutter. I mean, like Colonel Sanders from, years ago in Kentucky. That guy had a vision for a new kind of chicken restaurant, and he was poor. You look at somebody like Napoleon Hill from Think and Grow Rich. It took him years to figure out Think and Grow Rich. It was 20 years of study of performance, and he had been a publisher. He worked in a lumber yard. I think he ran a lumber yard. Like, he had all kinds of jobs, and he had some success in the world, but it was really one kind of disaster after another in a way, in his own mind, I think, until he found, let's call it finding yourself, which is where the vision is. The vision comes from finding yourself in that process.
Okay. And so how do you then master yourself, right? And because that's, in large part, as I understand it, that's sort of what the red pill pathway is about, right?
It is.
It's about
Yeah.
mastering, once you've gotten to the point where you're ready to take that vision and really grasp it, then it's a matter of figuring out what would you have to do internally.
Yeah, it's a great question.
How does that work?
So for me, it's an 8-week process, and week 1 is, I call it decision. And the week 1 process with decision starts with self-inquiry. It's an inner inquiry. And I've seen this in every wisdom tradition that I've run across. There is some organized system for self-inquiry, which just means being honest with yourself about what's going on. So it's poking through the illusions, looking under the veil, allowing your inner Wizard of Oz to be transparent to yourself. And that first week of decision is all about that inner inquiry. And then recognizing that you're going to make a decision to get what you want in your life and stop screwing around. There's got to be a moment. And my moment was September 20th of 2020, 5 a.m. I remember it clearly, where I made a decision of, I'm going for it. I don't know what it is. Now, you don't have to know what the vision is. This is important. The vision emerges over time. You start with the decision of, I am here to get what I want in my life. I've done my inner inquiry. I recognize where I am. I recognize some things are missing. There's a feeling something's missing. I don't know what's going on necessarily. And then the third part of week 1 to me is to begin to adopt a new lifestyle approach I call leap, don't run, which is to shift the awareness from focusing on getting the answer, chasing the results, always, sorry about my dog, always knowing what to do, whiteboarding stuff, figuring it out, to recognizing, paying attention to what's going on around you and paying attention to yourself is where the answers are. And this is what, from my own studies of myself, have worked, but also I've corroborated this in terms of what the most successful people in the world do.
Okay. So what are the rest of the steps? So we go kind of, you said that's week 1, it's 8 weeks. So what happens? So now you've got, you started to come to grips with reality.
That's what it is. Yeah, that's good.
What comes next?
So the week 2 is understanding what I call the 5 keys, which is the leap, don't run lifestyle. So it's understanding really what your mission is, understanding how vision works, and beginning to get into vision orientation, even if you don't know exactly what yours is yet, but how visions work and how you develop it. And then the third key is what I call open aperture focus, which is really learning how to open yourself up to see opportunities that maybe you've otherwise missed because you've been too narrow in deciding, oh, this is all I get. So you're trying to move into more unlimited potential. And then surrender and detachment. I won't explain in too much detail, but getting into those keys of not focusing on outcomes, but focusing more on the opportunities that are in front of you is where surrender and detachment work. So that's week 2. Week 3 is called blueprint. You're figuring out more who you are, what you like to do, who you want to be around, who you want to impact and help. And then week 4 is really, so that's direction. And then week 4 is identifying who, what your stories are and how you can effectively speak and communicate to those people that you're going to impact and in the market, that they're in. And then it's important to figure out how you want to be visible based on what you like to do. So I'm telling people, if you don't like social media, don't do social media. If you want to do a podcast, do a podcast. If you want to go to networking events, go to networking events. But the key is, how do you become visible in a way that suits you so you want to do it all the time? So we work that out. And then experiences is, to me, it's not about marketing or selling, which is getting people to do what you want through various techniques. It's more about, how do you share experiences free and then paid? So that includes refining the product or building the product, the pricing of it, all of these things based on experience sharing approaches. And then the week after that, we're really focusing on how do you build your daily practices? How do you keep yourself on track throughout the day? Because often we don't see evidence that what we're doing is working for a while. A lot of these things sort of, you feel them and you're going in the right direction when you line up these keys right and you're doing things in a way that's effective and is going to work. But you don't always see the evidence right away. So how do you keep going with confidence? We'll work on that. And then finally, I think really getting people building their own mentors, peers, and partnership groups becomes really important. Because what I've learned is, a lot of us who are successful are doing these things behind the scenes together in an organized way with mentors, peers, and partners. So getting people into realizing you don't have to just go, do this off all by yourself and, chase results and chase clients.
Yeah. Well, something you said to me reminded me of the story. I mean, because you and I have talked a number of times before this about your encounter with Tai Chi and meditation and all of that. And how many years have you done that? And how long was it before you started really seeing results out of that?
I started doing Tai Chi in my late 20s, and then I got into what they call the water method of martial arts, which is learning how to be in a flow, as opposed to attacking someone. You're sort of redirecting their attack towards you and things like that. So I kind of understood it that way back then. I think the more advanced stuff for me really came towards the beginning of 2023. I mean, I was building up to it, but I discovered what I call wisdom traditions in 2023, and I really got all the way in there from February up until, and I still do, but really in September, I feel like I kind of got there with it. And there's a big difference between what I call wisdom from sages and then guru advice. So I was in the guru advice world for a long time, which are people who figured out something that works and they're teaching other people how to do it like they did. And that's helpful. That's helpful. There's nothing wrong with that. But there's certain underlying, almost invisible principles that make the universe work and go, that we don't really understand that well, but have been described in infinite detail in all kinds of different pathways and traditions. And I spent really a solid year down that rabbit hole all the way, not just learning them, but experiencing them in my own inner experience, all of these truths and laws and how things work at this more invisible level, and corroborating my experience against the wisdom of the historical record. And I found there's themes here. And it repeats over and over again. And the Tai Chi and Taoism and all of that is just a aspect of the same thing. It's just one entry point into that wisdom piece.
Yeah. Lots of ways up the mountain.
This is so important you said that, because I think this is one of the fundamental problems is so I spent a couple of years, I call it the entrepreneur experiment. It lasted 3 years. It was September 20th of 2020 to September 20th, 2023. And I went through Sales Sherpa, Revenue Climber, and Solopreneur Inc. and all this craziness when I turned my business over to somebody to run and took passive income from it to do this. And it really wasn't until the last year where I realized that I was spending 2 years really copying people who had what I wanted. And I realized, like, stop doing that. It's find your own pathway up that mountain, but there's certain laws and rules and systems and paradigms and frameworks and stuff that always work and have always worked. And then I just got rid of the rest of the stuff. I was like, I don't need any of that anymore. And then I realized, well, I don't have to copy anybody. I can do this my own way. That's the vision creation. That's creating from vision like an artist would, as opposed to a business person in a conference room with a whiteboard trying to figure out what will work. Like, I left that all behind.
Wow. So if somebody wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way to reach out?
Well, the best way is just to go to redpillpathway.com. And what you'll find there is content. So if you don't want to talk or don't want to talk yet, there's a podcast and there's a number of other links towards different kinds of articles and videos that you can get to know me better and what I'm talking about better. Or if you feel like you're ready for a meeting and you click the link ready for the red pill or something like that, there's some instructions there about what's available and about getting time on my calendar if that makes sense.
Great. And that concludes our show. Thanks today for my guest, Larry Kaul, the creator of the Red Pill Pathway. I hope you learned something about creating a vision and moving towards success. Thanks so much for listening. You've been listening to the Profit Minds podcast. This is your host, Dr. Stephen Kirch. Please visit www.profitminds.net for other episodes or to contact me. Thank you for your positive feedback, comments, questions, and for sharing this show with others. Thanks for listening. Have a grateful day.